This part is the pouring of libations. Libation is a non-religious cultural expression. And for this, we like for everyone to stand for this. So when I pour libation, again, it's a non-religious practice, so we're not calling any name of any deity. We know that there's only one, known by many names. And as I pour the libation, we all say Ashe. Ashe simply means, let it be so. I'm in agreement, all right? So the first libation I will pour is to that Creator, that Most High, known by many names, but we know that there is only one. Ashe? We then pour this libation for those ancestors, let's say our national ancestors, that because of the lives they lived, the sacrifices they made, they opened doors and they laid foundations upon which we were supposed to build. I will call such names, and you may know of many other names. I lived abroad for an eternity, so I may not be cognizant of all of our national heroes and sheroes. But I know names such as Stokely Carmichael, Ashe. I know names such as Makandal Daga, Ashe. And then you help me out. Who do you know? Ashe. Come on, don't be shy. National ancestors. Ashe. And the ancestral realm is a non-political realm. So even though we have ancestors that may, in their politics, may have done some missteps, because of what they did, they still laid a foundation for us. So in that respect, I call the name up what is known as the father of our nation, Eric Williams, Dr. Eric Williams. Ashe. Who else do you know? Ashe. 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 Very good. Ashe, right? The library wing is devoted to Mr. James Bigot, and we'll go into now our personal ancestors, call them by name. Your personal ancestors. All right? Ashe. John and Harriet Pigott. Ashe. 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 I'm not hearing the ashe from the crowd. All right? Ancestors, those that have gone into. Another one. A good day. Ashe. All right? And now we will pour this libation for those ancestors yet to come. As Africans, we say our ancestors come again. All right? So they come through the young babies that are yet unborn. Those are ancestors returning. So we want to pour a libation for them. Ashe? Ashe? Ashe-o. And normally in our practice, we would pour libation for those disagreeable energies, because we had some miserable ancestors. Yes, they were miserable. And so if you don't give them theirs, they'll come and they'll cause mischief, trouble your heart, and then we get to bickering against each other. Normally we will step outside and pour the libations for them. I am going to declare that over here is outside, and I'm going to come pour the libation for them, give them theirs, so when they come into the room, this is where they are. Nothing to do with OBI. Relax yourself, okay? And we say, touche to them. They get the touche.
Our moderator for tonight is a youth ambassador, recently returned from Trinidad, where he was representing at the Youth Parliament, I believe. He's a spoken word artist, a noted recording artist. If there's any event going on in Tobago and indeed in Trinidad and also in the region, with regards to poetry, spoken word, art, literature, he's usually there. He breathes deeply. He speaks eloquently. His words have meaning. His music also. So I'd like to welcome the moderator for tonight's session is Mr. Xavier Edwardz.
Thanks, Sean. And greetings to you all. It's a pleasure to be here. What I just came back from in Trinidad was the Caribbean Youth Leaders Summit, which was a regional integration project with various youth advocates from all the islands of the region, which is why one of the reasons I ran a little late. But I had to be here, so I appreciate you all. And it's a pleasure to be here. And I am hopeful that this session would be interactive, enlightening, honest, free-flowing, and feel free to ask any questions, and feel free to speak your minds. This is a non-judgmental space. I would like to introduce our first panelist, none other than the cultural icon and Calypsonian and well-known and well-loved Rawle Titus.
Okay, good evening, everyone. When I was asked to be a panelist here this evening, I almost said no. And then when I was listening to all the discussion by the Secretary of the Writers Guild, I started to wonder, will he refer to me as elder or well, you know what? All right. But I'm happy to be here. And I usually say we need understanding. We have gathered this evening to talk about, and I don't want anybody to feel I'm talking to you. I want to talk with you, and the discussions will continue afterwards. Well, we're going to be talking about something. Trauma. Oh, that's a harrowing experience, eh? And it leaves scars, psychological scars. We're going to eventually talk about healing. And I keep saying to myself over the last couple days, healing from what? There had to be something that we need healing from. I almost ended up saying, we need healing most of all from ourselves. And it's going to be controversial, and I expect to defend that statement. But we're talking about post-slavery. Slavery went before. Slavery caused this trauma that we are talking about. And I want to be quick to explain slavery was an institution. Slavery was business. Enslavement is what we heard from. I don't think I need to go into all of what made it such a harrowing experience for us. But it was traumatic. We don't have to become ancestors to understand that. It was traumatic. And I want to sort of set the stage for what we actually going to be talking about. We have to understand that this healing process we are talking about, and it is one of the things Dr. Degruy would have mentioned in her book, had to do with us adapting to that period following emancipation. But even before that, I want us to understand that it was not the descendants of the Africans alone that thought there should be some healing. Having said that, I want to warn you that some of the information you would receive, like the Amelioration Act of 1798, had a sting in the tail. And whereas they spoke in that act about bettering the conditions of the slaves, it was also business. Much of the act had to do with the intention to delay the abolition process, which I guess you would have to ask some more about it because I only have 3 hours and I don't want to use up all my time. Right. So, what happened following that? In the same 1798, the Leeward Islands group had a kind of arrangement where they said, hey, we have to better the conditions of the slaves. In Tobago, and I like this, and there was an assembly in 1798. In Tobago, both houses of the assembly took a decision to put a joint select committee together to talk about improving the lot of the slaves. And there's a whole set of stuff. The moderator has that book, I think, or it's there. You know, there's a whole lot of stuff appended in that book, which is called Wake People Wake. And it talks about giving them clothes, giving them rations, issuing cards, so you present a card and you get your food. And to somebody, that was so much better than anything else in the world. But even though the Africans received these rations, as a Calypsonian said, I gonna like you for what you give me, but one day, love would turn to hate and will turn at such a fast rate that the hate will become stronger. What we had happening during those periods, people were still running away from the plantation. And a lot of uprisings were taking place in the Caribbean. You understand what I'm saying? By 1804, Haiti was an independent republic. And that block, that period, that block of years was one that saw significant developments here. I'm talking about in the Caribbean. It would have impacted somewhat on us in Trinidad and Tobago. I want to remind you that by 1807, the slave trade was abolished, and we know the story. By 1838, there was no more freedom. But no more freedom meant, and I saw a play some time ago that said, hey, are free, yes, but we are going tomorrow. What are buying food with? Who taking care of me? That was the trauma that they faced post-emancipation. And it was very difficult because we know that many of the plantation owners said, hey, you could come back and work for us. I'll pay you, but pay you how much? And that was the kind of bedeviling that the Africans had. Emancipation came, colonialism came. And as time went on, people started to realize that one way to heal this pressure, one way to make us feel more secure is if we all come together. By 1968, there was something in the Caribbean, in the West Indies, as they said at the time, called West Indian Federation. Some of you are much too young to know much about that, too much about it. But the West Indian Federation was meant to be a political coming together of all the territories in the area, for security, for safety, for everything. whatever happened to that? It broke up, and by the early 1960s, we had a sort of splintering of the whole West Indies. Jamaica first had a referendum. Jamaica left the Federation, to be followed by Trinidad and Tobago. That was the period when Dr. Williams would have said things like, 1 from 10 leaves nothing. And I guess we could discuss that further. So we had that Federation crash. Sometime in 1973, we had the birth of what we now have, CARICOM. We had, I should also say, the Caribbean Free Trade Area came in between there. And then we had CARICOM. Then we had the CSME. And the people realized, hey, we can't fight this alone. You're not going to find healing if you stand by yourself and other people not supporting you. And that was the kind of picture we had. Of course, we know sometime after 1973, Trinidad and Tobago became a Republican nation. I think that was 1976. And things just kept turning over from there. One of the things that I noticed about Dr. Degruy's writing was that she mentioned a lot of things that we know here. There have been people who have been saying, do not dwell on the past. I find a little bit of difficulty with it. Because when I think back on the kind of experience that our ancestors suffered, I feel depressed at times. It's not easy to ask somebody to forget all of that. She says we need healing from looking back at our past, remembering that past. And I'm sure all of us here are aware that every time we talk emancipation, every time we talk about that development, everybody says, let us go back and look at that. If you look back at it too much, you are going to remember it as much. It will hurt even more. And therefore, I want to suggest that we look forward in a positive way. While we build our institutions, be honest, be serious, do self-examination, and you will begin the process of healing. It is interesting to note that Joy Degruy would have said in her book, hey, there was such a thing, there is such a thing in America called the crab in a barrel syndrome. All of us know that. Where we say somebody's going up and we hold their ankles. And when they get down, we climb on their shoulders, their backs, their whatever, and try to get up ourselves. We have to get rid of the crab in a barrel syndrome. It is something that has plagued society in the Caribbean. It has plagued society in Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to say it has plagued society even more in Tobago. Some people are not going to like me to say that. But it's a real killer. This dragging each other down. People have been saying things like, hey, we can heal ourselves if we be orderly, if we obey instructions, and if we do what those in authority want us to do. Martin Luther King said in his memoirs, there are just laws and unjust laws. We have to make laws have a human face, a human conscience even. And we cannot afford to be destroying ourselves by being unfair to each other. What time I have, Mr. Moderator? Right, it says 20 minutes? All right. What do we need to do? At the beginning of this session, the secretary of the Tobago Writers Forum would have done libations. And I like when he said, it's not over here, but you do libations as would happen in some heritage festival shows, at the beginning that is. And some people feel you are the biggest Obia man in town. They want your number. Yeah, they want a bat too. Hello. We have disrespected our ancestors for too long. We have disrespected ourselves for too long. And I want to make the point, that any time at all you want respect, you have to be respectful. You can't demand what you don't give. And you can't want respect only for yourself. You would notice I didn't go by here so at all. And there's a reason for it. When I was writing this, when I reached page 75, I said, good, I'm going good. But then you hear the gentleman say, I only have 2 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, I actually look forward to discussion because I don't want to be talking to you. I want to talk with you. And I want us to understand together what this is about. Yes, we say freedom. Yes, we say emancipation. Emancipation from what? How many of us are seriously conscious about emancipation? That freedom for self-determination. That's what I want to leave with you. I thank you until later.
So essentially, we are here today because we have, to some extent, examined ourselves and we have determined that there are some symptoms of what Dr. Degruy describes as post-traumatic slave syndrome. We have the same multi-generational trauma from centuries of slavery, oppression and institutionalized racism, and a belief that the benefits of the society may not necessarily be accessible to us. In the Caribbean, in Tobago in particular, we would have experienced chattel slavery and racism. However, we were spared the horrendous post-slavery experiences of the anti-black laws in the United States, which in some ways were just as extreme as slavery in comparison with them. Or, I was discussing this with Dr. Allard just before when we first came in, perhaps we have not been as efficient in recording what happened right after slavery as they have been in the United States. But Dr. Allard reminded me that the British were really quite efficient at recording. So it seems that perhaps our experience post-slavery, in spite of apprenticeship and so on, was not as bad as the kinds of things that went on in the United States, extreme sexual attacks, lynching, etc. However, stepping back from that, we have a series of suggested methods of healing presented by Dr. Degruy, and we need to examine them to see where we can apply them, or perhaps variations that would help the healing process in Tobago. The other point that I think is important here is that while we were not responsible for the damage to our people, we were not the ones responsible for dragging ourselves across the Atlantic. And of course, people will always tell you the kind of foolishness that irritates me that, African people were involved in the slave trade too. So, it's not really. Every single conflict in history, you would have had collaborators. In World Wars I and II, you had collaborators. And let us go to the movies. If you remember The Sound of Music, the captain's butler was a Nazi supporter. Okay? In Gone with the Wind, Rhett Butler was not necessarily a supporter, but a collaborator. He was selling weapons to anybody. Okay? So you will always have that kind of thing. So the fact that you had some Africans involved in the slave trade does not mean that it was justifiable. Okay? So just to clear up that. Somebody told me that the other day. All right. The point is then that while we were not responsible for the damage, if we wish our people to survive with dignity, and we're really doing this more for our children, I do not know that I am going to be improved by the healing that we see as necessary. I can be improved in the sense of how I view the world, all right? But seeing that I am a child of 1970, that is when I really came of age, I have always been very conscious about my skin and what it is. I never needed bleaching cream. I was always conscious that my hair is fine. That is not to say, let me not make you feel that I have not done the hot comb thing. I have not done the straightening cream thing in my younger days. Because to a great extent, when you are younger, you always just want to follow what the crowd is doing. But as you get older and more mature, and you understand what straightening your hair suggests to everybody who sees you, I have gone past that. And I have resisted since I've come back to Tobago, because you know I'm a nice girl from Tobago, as supposed to look a certain way. So, you know, people will come by the side, so you're not going to fix your hair? So, all right, so if we want our people, our young people, to improve, to survive, to understand what has happened to them, we are the ones who must initiate and then continue the healing process, because no one will care for our own people except us. And to some extent in Tobago, I'm wondering if we are off to a late start, because I am seeing some levels of indifference to each other and each other's suffering that would have been alien to the Tobago of 20 and 30 years ago when I grew up here. I don't know what is happening. And I have had some hard questions put to me by my younger generation. This Tobago you have described, where is it, Mommy? We are not seeing it. We are not seeing it. Right. Now, the methods of healing include determinedly promoting life, family life, determinedly promoting cooperation in communities. You remember the days of that? Well, okay, plenty young people here. But as a child, if I walked down to Scarborough and I lived on Wilson Road, right where the Martineau Plaza is now, that's where I lived. If I walk down the road with my brother and I misbehave in Scarborough, before I reach home, my mother knew. She would meet us at the door with a hanger, okay? Because everybody took care of children. You can't be doing strippiness in the road. You are Aggie child, and they know you. Right. Correcting social behaviors, and she talks about improved diet and nutrition, proper exercise, stress reduction, and so on. Striving to understand the way things work in officialdom. That is another problem I notice in Tobago. People are not courageous to approach officialdom to get their business sorted out. And once they happen to get their business sorted out, they don't care about nobody else. That is all your business. All you see about all yourself. Okay? A kind of isolationist kind of behavior that never used to be common in Tobago in the past. We have to know ourselves, our stories, our triumphs, even our mistakes, so that we could know what to avoid, so that we can build on our strength. She refers to vacant self-esteem. So we must learn to build the self-esteem of our children. You know, you hear some people speaking to their children and you wonder, this must be their worst enemy. Why this so-and-so you don't behave yourself? What, just like a stupid father. What is that? These children ask you to come here. You go and get yourself involved, you have child, and then you want to rough them up. What is that about? So we have to control our inner world. That is how we feel about ourselves. Okay, we have to control what they call the racist socialization. There has been a lot of study done on the movies and how they present people of African descent. As a veteran of Tarzan movies, I will tell you, it took me a long time to ask myself, if this man land up in the jungle, and he's a white fella, he grew with the apes. These people who was living there for hundreds of years, how he could know the place better than these people who was there hundreds of years before him? What make him the leader? He leading the people, he leading the apes, he leading everything. He could fight a lion. I see Tarzan fight a lion and kill the lion already. Remember, Rex Cinema was right down the road from Wills Road and was 25 cents. All right. You know, when you say these things, people will know your age. The implication is that everything that is done in the world, white is superior and black is inferior. We need to tell the truth about the world in which we live and consciously promote positive images of ourselves. Be conscious of the images the media presents to you. You know why I decided I wanted to be a writer? And I don't think in my heart and soul I'm a real writer, because they say a real writer, they don't care, they get up every morning and they want to write. Me, I just get up every morning and I think in all kinds of things other than writing. But what first sparked the idea is that I was looking for books for my daughters that were positive images of black women, and I could not find any. After you get past Enid Blyton, and Bobbsey Twins, and Nancy Drew, where are you going after that? I couldn't find any, and I felt we need to try to have more books that affirm blackness, that affirm the fact that black people are intelligent, they are creative, they are wonderful, just like any other race of people. Okay? And we're also very resilient, because after all, we survive out here. All right? We need to behave in the way we would want our children to behave. So many parents will tell you, well, the child ain't reading at all. They ain't doing that. I find it, they're doing good in school at all. What book you read last? You ain't reading at all. You're just reading the headlines in the newspaper. But your child must turn into a scholar and must read all the time. We have to demonstrate by our behaviors what we want our children to be so that they can improve. We have to create, and this one struck me very, very powerfully. She said that they had done studies and they showed that children survived catastrophic events better when they had a strong family narrative. They knew that their grandmother was somebody who worked hard and was, in my case, my grandmother was a washerwoman for the hotels, and their grandfather worked hard and he developed his land and so on and so on. Because they said children like that became more self-sufficient and they weathered difficult periods, difficult situations more efficiently than children who did not have a strong family narrative. So it is important to let your children know where you came from, what kind of sacrifices were made for you to get where you are. Many children don't understand. When you see them walking about the streets now, they don't understand the sacrifices that parents made in the past for their children want to get to school, for children to get shoes, etc. I went to school at Scarborough Methodist. There were many children who came to school without shoes. They had no shoes, but they came. And sometimes they're smelling loudly of the pig pen because they have to see about the pigs before they come to school, and they don't have running water. So you're making a distinction. I'm going to go by the river for water to bathe, or I'm going to see about the pigs and go to school. So they see about the pigs and they come to school. And they're smelling piggy, but that is how it was. And somehow there was no, we didn't seem to have that. We were not allowed to have that. I got some serious licks from my mother for saying something negative about somebody. All right. The whole business of spirituality. Xavier referred to that. That's a very important thing. You have to understand that we are not just this physical being. There is another part of us. At least I believe that. Other people may not. But I believe that this is just the physical part. We all have spirit selves, another part of our being that is perhaps more closely related to the Creator, as Rodney says, however we might call the Creator. We must build our communities. We're too ignorant. Every single thing that somebody says, you take it personally. No. How are you going to get along if you're going to behave like that? You know, when I heard about Klim, it's a weird place to go. You remember Klim powdered milk? That people my age, a little over 21, people my age grew up on. That is a milk cooperative from the Netherlands. You think that them Netherlands farmers never used to be vexed with one another and quarrel with one another, but they got together. They are buying their inputs by bulk. They develop a methodology for drying the milk, and they are selling milk all through the Caribbean at that time. A cooperative. We can't cooperate about nothing. I vex because Wade better looking than me. Eh? I vex because I feel the brother like me. Okay? And those are the things that in our heads, but we don't understand that we need to look beyond that. We need to look beyond the result we're trying to create. We are trying to create a result where life is going to be better for our children. Life is going to be better in Tobago. Things are going to be done more efficiently. The boat will work properly. Establishing, and this is the last one, establishing and supporting honest and strong leaders. We make a mistake in Trinidad and Tobago. We think that our political leaders, they are the entire kind of leadership we need. But that is just one kind of leadership. And they themselves interpret their role so narrowly. It looked to me, all they're trying to do is see how we could divide this money. Give Mr. Titus a little bit, give Sean a little bit. That is all they're doing. And we let us sit down here and wait and hope oil prices go up, however they go up. What about your role modeling for men? What is happening with our young men? I was teaching at UWI. The classes are mainly women. We had 2 young men in a class, a tall, lovely young man called, well, I'm not going to call his name because we might know him. The young man disappeared from the class. I said, but where's so-and-so? What happened? Oh, Miss, don't bother, he in town. I said, well, what he doing in town? Don't bother, miss, he in town. And that was the only response I was able to get. He's in town. I spotted him once in town. And then I never saw him again. What has become of him? Where are the parents? Where are the fathers? Where are the... I, as a student, I could not miss with my mother. In my secondary school days, I was living behind the bridge, ladies and gentlemen. Whatever them behind the bridge people doing, that's their business. It has nothing to do with me. I am Agnes' child. And as a child, you used to feel your mother might kill you or something, because you know if you slip, you slide. We have to be responsible for our children. We have to be responsible for the children next door. We have a big job. I pray that we will have the will to get it started. It's not going to finish in my generation, but I pray that we have the will to get it started. Thank you very much.
It could be saddening and disappointing, but it could make us enthusiastic too, because I see a lot of youth faces, and that gives me hope. That makes me faithful for the future. So I just want to give thanks to all the young people who came out today. It's really, really good to see. It's inspiring, and I am going to take this time to introduce you all to our next panelist, the youth on the panel. Dr. Ryan Allard, who I saw a couple of weeks ago at the library, and I was really impressed with his presentation. Yeah, those who were there know what I'm talking about, and those who weren't will find out today. Ryan is a senior fellow for transportation and the built environment at Project Drawdown, a US-based non-profit organization that assesses, maps, models, and communicates the world's most substantive solutions to reversing climate change. Oh, that's real. Climate change is real, I make no mistake. Ryan leads research at Project Drawdown that models transportation and building solutions. Prior to Project Drawdown, Ryan worked in finance and in the management consulting locally and internationally. He has lived in multiple cities on 2 continents and in both Trinidad and Tobago. And his experiences have enabled him to enjoy interacting with people from all walks of life. Ryan has given speeches and interviews to audiences in Trinidad and Tobago, North America, and Europe, the local defenders of nature, and volunteers his time for local causes. He earned his PhD and MSc degrees in transportation systems at the University of Lisbon in Portugal, and a BSc in aeronautical and aerospace engineering at MIT in Boston, USA.
Okay, so this is about the UN Decade for People of African Descent, all right? And the UN Decade has objectives based on policy for governments and multilateral agencies. So it sees the purpose of creating a more supportive world for people of African descent to survive, and more importantly, as we heard today, thrive, all right? Thrive in achieving their goals. So that begs the question, what are the goals of people of African descent? What are our goals here in Trinidad and Tobago? The UN Declaration doesn't seem to point to that directly. It's not very explicit on that point. So I really do commend the organizers for this afternoon's event for focusing on that, helping us to come to some understanding about what those goals could be. So the idea of healing, especially as it relates to self-repair, healing ourselves, this is a very important goal for us to work towards. So the question is, how do descendants of African slaves heal themselves and prepare themselves to make the future rather than have the future happen to us? The most important type of repair is self-repair. It allows you to learn, so you get smarter, and makes you stronger in resisting future damage. It's cheaper than bringing in an external consultant, and I'm here winking at our government. It builds internal relationships and reduces dependency. But what is there to repair? Frantz Fanon, that revolutionary philosopher, talked about the idea of the collective unconscious of a society. So Fanon calls this the sum of the prejudices, the myths, the collective attitudes of a given group. So I like to think of this as the common beliefs that we have here, let's say in Tobago or in Trinidad and Tobago, that either restrain us or help us to advance, and particularly help us to develop. But when I say development, I don't mean simply economic development. So I think developed people or developing people or people who are developed create societies that provide opportunities for each and every one of us to reach our full potential. So that might be in human relationships, it might be in our occupations, creation in some sort, and of course the pursuit of happiness. So I'll focus the rest of my time on providing some thoughts on how we can heal ourselves and prepare for this developed future by picking out some of this collective unconscious of Tobago. So I might talk a bit conceptually, but I'll try to give some concrete examples of programs and ideas that we can actually implement. So the common thread through all of this would be the idea of respect, something that flows throughout all of Dr. Degruy's work. Now the first question, do we really respect ourselves? Do we treat ourselves with honor and dignity? When we dress in a very revealing fashion, say around carnival time, when we subject ourselves to excessive alcohol, say around carnival time, when we imply that kinky hair is unattractive, as Ms. Burris-Phillip described earlier, when we dance excessively sexually in public, say around carnival time, every weekend, right? When we eat objectively unhealthy food, and especially for men, when we delay going to the doctor for treatment, are we behaving in ways that are respecting ourselves? Are we displaying good levels of self-respect? So I would say explicitly no. No self-respecting person would treat yourself in that way. No self-respecting person would not take care of yourself. And this is one of the most basic steps of self-repair. Self-respect was a key target for destruction by colonialists, all right? As people with no self-respect are easier to manipulate. Self-respect is closely linked to self-control and self-confidence, self-esteem. And these are the building blocks of self-repair. Building ourselves takes time. Building our self-respect, that is, takes time and can't be done in a short period. So I've heard of people talking about developing mentoring programs, mentorship programs, for instance, for the youth. And I think this would be an excellent way to achieve many social goals right here in Tobago, one of which would be building up, of course, the self-respect of the youth so that they become self-respecting adults. I think this would be an excellent way forward, and I hope we can discuss some opportunities to making that a reality. So secondly, do we respect each other? When parents cuss out their inquisitive child, whether in public or at home, for asking a question, when we agree with our friends to meet at 5 p.m., but we show up at 6 without warning them, when we deal with people in any service industry and we get rude attitude, we are in all those cases dealing with a lack of self-respect, a lack of respect for others, rather. So all human beings deserve respect. This means accepting that they are human. They have needs, they have wants, they make mistakes, and they want to experience the best in life. And this goes back also to what Rodney said about respecting our ancestors, too. But respecting others requires consciously thinking of them as human beings, as complex human beings. And there may be ways for us to stimulate that. For instance, think about the opportunities we might have for creating some sort of media campaign to help encourage that kind of thinking. Do we respect our collective abilities? When we hear people dismiss any public servant talking about a new government program, saying that that wouldn't work in Tobago, you know, they'll steal the money in Trinidad if they do that. We can't replace the Privy Council with the Caribbean Court of Justice. It'll just lead to corruption or, you know, more problems. This and that institution, such and such institution can't get anything right. Or we just like to bring up how low our productivity is without making suggestions for improvement. Aren't we doing, when we do that, aren't we just putting down our fellow man or woman's efforts to make Trinidad and Tobago better? I would say that instead, highlighting exemplary individuals, groups, and institutions, whenever we can, would be far more constructive and far more effective. So I was wondering recently, for instance, if a local TV program that highlights some of the hard-working people we have right here in Tobago might be a worthy endeavor. I also wonder if better transparency on the side of the operation of government institutions, particularly on spending money, maybe putting these kind of reports online, would help stimulate better trust in our institutions. Now, for one that was referred to earlier, do we respect our Caribbean neighbors? The number of times that I've heard tensions in Tobago about the Guyanese people living here, or the Jamaicans in Trinidad having issues, or the Trinis don't like the Jamaicans, or the Jamaicans don't like the Bajans, and it goes on and on and on. It makes me wonder if we really do have a common Caribbean identity. We like to say that, but do we actually have one? Island thinking is a big problem. So I wonder if we might be contributing to that problem. The UN Declaration specifically talks about reducing xenophobia. So there's no place for xenophobia here in TNT or elsewhere in the Caribbean. So I think that calls into question the potential for some sort of long-term program. One way could be making exchanges of human capital more common in the Caribbean. Certainly we know about the CSME, but I would love to also see a privately funded, publicly backed, Caribbean-wide high school exchange program, where fourth formers, or maybe lower sixth formers, spend a term or a year in a high school in a different country to help broaden their perspectives, see commonalities across the Caribbean, or see differences. Great, so we have some volunteers to that program right away. That's great. That's great. So I think that, in the long run, would help to integrate the Caribbean in ways that today's leaders certainly cannot. A related issue is that of respect for Africa itself. Africa is an enormously large and diverse continent. Seriously, Africa is 3 times as large as America. It's larger than Russia and larger than all of Central and South America and the Caribbean combined. So Africa, with its 54 countries, is also vastly diverse. What would be your guess for how many native languages are spoken in Africa? Can anyone guess? 128. Do I hear more or less? Thousands. Exactly, thousands. Thousands. Perhaps, or maybe a smaller country. So yes, it's thousands of different ethnicities, thousands of different languages. So we should accept this when we talk about Africa. When we make generalizations about Africans, we should be aware that we may be making some ignorant statements. I was talking with a gentleman from another country some years ago, and he was asking me where I was from, so I told him Trinidad and Tobago. And he seemed content. You know, he accepted that. He moved on with his life. However, it was a bit surprising for me, so I asked him, do you know where that is? He said, oh, that's in West Africa, right? Close, yes. Another time, I was speaking to another foreigner, and when I told him where I was from, he asked, what part of Jamaica is that from? So let's not fall into the trap by assuming that we know all about Africa in the same way. Let's give the continent the respect it deserves. So if we like African music, right, let's find out who that artist is, where that artist is from, what is the background that brings this type of music to the front. If we have some African clothing, the same way, let's try to find out the background of those artists that design those clothing. Is it from a particular tribe? Is there a story behind the particular clothing? Is it influenced by other tribes across Africa or people from outside of Africa? This is a global problem, however. So many times I've noticed that persons refer to individual countries. They'll say Italy, the UK, and the US, Brazil, but then they lump all of Africa together. You may have noticed this also. Scientific research has shown that the genetic diversity in Africa, this is the differences in genetic material in the blood of people who live in Africa, is greater than the genetic diversity of all other continents combined. So keep that in mind. We should treat Africa's 54 countries, over 1,000 languages, and 1 billion people as such, appreciating that diversity. So the most important thing we can do to repair ourselves is develop respect for ourselves and for all others. I think a greater level of respect for self and others would change our thoughts, our behaviors, habits, and our destiny. It would lead to a decline in crime, greater productivity, better wages, better education, cleaner environment, and a healthier and happier Trinidad and Tobago. There are some scientific evidence pieces for this. Some related studies show, for instance, that self-confidence does affect career success, and confidence in one's institutions improve a society's functioning. So I can imagine a Trinidad and Tobago where people of African descent have mutual respect for each other and for people of other ethnic groups and other countries. This mindset would empower us to achieve all the things that we aspire to do together. Thank you.
So show some love for Miss Ayanna Phillips, also known as Miss Melanin Magic, who will bless you all with a cultural piece.
Some woman living in the belly of the beast, while everyone else sleeps in peace. Anxiety and mental disorder, that is the usual order of a woman scorned and abused by her love. Lashes and scratches and patches, she skin burning without matches. Pains and aches on a morning, after a night full of beating. Concealer, powder, and lipstick, just to hide up the mystic. No shelters, no marches, no pastors talking about the bastards, sensationalizing racial anonymity, but we don't know their story. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter judge her like if they know her. Narcissist, narcissist, why you doing all this? They're killing women and they're taking them off on a list. You're moving like a terrorist, narcissist, narcissist, why you doing all this? Leaving motherless children in this evil abyss. One day you're gonna pay for this. Letting it all out. I'm not looking for clout. Spoken word, spoken line, click some brain rewind to a time when toxic masculinity took something from me, something that was not yours to take. Breathe, rewind. Toxic masculinity messed with my sanity. That time, I know I wasn't walking the straight line. I passed through a shortcut. Who knew that was the movie plot? Didn't your parents teach you about good and bad touch? I never looked at his face as he stroked me with pace. Invisible, impossible, I had to survive, stay alive. Hot tears flowing that were far from real. Where was my Jesus to take the wheel? Have you ever taken your last breath in a near-death ordeal? I've forgiven them all but you. But you had no face to erase the face and lock away in a suitcase. Although I washed myself clean, I still felt obscene. Anxiety at them all. God damn it, I was walking through a mall. Yes, it was night. Yes, I tried to fight. Nada, nilch, nothing, numb. I laid as a ton of bricks as I begged him to come. I gave him the motion with no emotion. Spoken word, spoken line. I didn't come here to rhyme, just to tell you about a time, so I rewind. Drake said he needed some head on a comfortable bed. I had to settle for danger and a stranger on a concrete bench who walks with a wire to wrap around her throat. Are men the real monsters walking this earth? M-A-N, it was woman that gave you birth. Intimate partner violence, sexual assault, inappropriate touching, all by default. The word is rape of our women and our girls. But little girls must be seen and not heard. Why were you on the road? What were you wearing? Victim blaming and shaming and defaming, reputation staining. This is draining. Spoken word, spoken line. I didn't come here to rhyme. Rewind. This story is mine. Thank you.
Not a question to the panelists, but more a comment on the poem that I just listened to and internalized. One of the, I guess, metaphors I pulled from it was this stranger in the dark is almost like, let's say, our oppressors, and we are this black woman going through this trauma and tragic experience, but to come out as the Melanin Queen stated, you know, glowing. I mean, we are better from our ordeal. So we could use it as a superpower, maybe. So just thank you again for sharing such a deep piece.
Post-traumatic, experience of what we seem to be still living. The divisions that were made during slavery, field slave, house slave, that sort of thing, that gradation and that colors and textures and all that, that seemed to be very much existent. And I'm trying to fit in. Now I understood what the doctor was saying, about the child and how the woman used to protect the male, especially they used to protect them, all right? You do lynch and all these fellas, and you see that how they protected them from, the hangings and, and that sort of thing. And it's quite interesting to see how we sort of relive this as a norm. You know, I think, you know, talk about narcissistic and that behavior. But as humans, we are somewhat all narcissists, right? Narcissistic in our behaviors, right? But we seem, as African people, to carry it to a sort of an extreme where it is unhealthy in that we seem not to care about others. And I'm wondering the origin of that. You know, you're talking about the respect and so for others and you know, the crab in the barrel and we just want a thing. All right? Why is it so difficult today for us to come together as a people, support, have business as we see other ethnic groupings doing? Why is that so difficult? What is the root cause of that, right? And how do you mitigate against that? I was a bit taken aback when no direct mention was made of the 1970 experience, all right? Because that was a real, true cultural revolution in itself, right? And how our own people deliberately, systematically destroyed that movement by some negative things that is plaguing the society today, right? I don't know, I mean, this is my gut feeling about this thing, all right? And
I'm a Tobagonian only 3 months out of the year. But what I find in Tobago that's different from in the U.S. is that here in Tobago, you have seemed to have more of a healing process and that you own property. Most Tobagonians have their own business. And the only place you find that in America, because we have Caucasians who don't allow us to progress, you are free to progress here. And that's what I admire about being in Tobago. And I tell everybody that if you want to see free Africans to come to Tobago, because I find that most Tobagonians, and I love your poetry, was fierce, sister, fierce, is that, you know, you own your property, you have business, you're running things, you know? So that's I see that a powerful asset about Tobago. As a storyteller, I try to teach our children, no matter where I tell stories, is that the thing that's really separating us on the world scale is that we're looking at black and white. And there's nothing white about white people. Marinate on that. And there's nothing black about being a black people. So until we all see ourselves as Africans, and until we start coming away from this white and black outlook, we're going to always be fighting not only ourselves, but we're going to be fighting the Europeans and the Caucasians. So I think it's important, our story, this brother here in the, I forgot your name, my son, Ryan, your point about how we talk to our children and how we teach them, it's a very powerful way we can do that is in storytelling and telling them about, like the sister said, about our storytelling and where we came from and who our people are. So when we do that, it all comes back to making them feel better about themselves and understanding the old folks' ways a little better and trying to live it today. I just want to thank you for this program. I hope to join the Tobago Writers Guild and just say give thanks. And it was wonderful. I have to leave. My friend has to go put eye drops in her husband.
Yeah, hello. I have a couple points to make. One, I think, in terms of this whole question of healing, I think is the topic. I think one of the things that we have to look, you know, one of the recipes I have is to make Tobago Tobagonian again. We have to look to what I refer to as identify our ethnic and cultural resources, enduring in group solidarity, kinship ties, reciprocal ethnic bonding, the informal mobilization of capital and rotate it among people. When I was growing up in my village in Moriah, these were the resources that carried the community. We didn't have any division. So therefore, we have that reference point already. We didn't have that division. I remember in religion, I would get up on a Sunday morning. We have Sunday school. Then after that, you have the church service. In the evening, you go to a Sunday school run by another institution. In the night, you come, in the evening, later in the night, you have the Baptist church next door. So you didn't have that division in that kind of situation. And people used to work together. I remember people had very strong values, sometimes some of them misplaced. I remember when they were building the roads going up to Castara and so on, because people had these strong values in terms of what they believed. This guy was saying, you see me now walk on Eric Williams Road. Right? So therefore he used to walk around, make sure. But the point is, you know, you had strong, you had views that you believed in and so on, etc. And one of the things I'm wondering, what happened? And the only thing I could come down on is party politics. Party politics, which brings you in a situation where you have situational ethics and that sort of thing, where the truth has become a lie. Right? So you have what I think, what has happened over time is when the black intellectuals came to power, nothing changed until they continued to see about the inches of the economic classes were generally white people. Really, the black people are never part of that employer situation, etc. And therefore we developed this, what I call the Anglo-Saxon, Afro-Saxon culture, where we were generally dismissive, negative, and contemptuous in most of the other things that we do. And so therefore, and this is why Chocolate could say, you know, and I always like this tune, it's dotish you and stupid me. It's PNM and UNC. you know. And we have to recognize what is dividing us. So we have to more or less come together and look at what sometimes I refer to is backward to the future. We have to go back, look what is happening to Tobago, look at what a Tobagonian is, because we had that. We had those resources. Intimacy is a thing that we had in our societies, and we used to build on that in terms of mobilizing ourselves and so on. So I am saying that we have to look back to some of the things that we have lost. This is a reference point, and we could start from there. We don't have to learn anything new. We may just have to use different systems and mechanisms and so on. Okay, thank you very much.
This is a very tough subject, right? We're looking at wounds and how do we heal wounds. Who wants to talk about wounds? It's a very tough subject to talk about. So that's why I know that we're so quiet and no one's really speaking up. There's a sense of like contentment. So while we're in this barrel that's going down the river and there's this precipice and we know the barrel's about to go over the precipice and we're all gonna mash up. But for the moment, we're content. We're in this barrel together. The young lady talked about the fact that here in Tobago we seem to be healed. I lived in America for 44 years, and trust me, we're far from it. Yes, we have our own property. That's just the dynamics of things. But today, as opposed to yesterday, those properties are what? Fenced in, walled in, right? Are we keeping ourselves in? Are we keeping our neighbors out? Huh? The children can no longer cut through to go where they're going. They have to walk around, right? So yes, we have our property. They all have bars on the windows. So how free are we? Let's be honest with ourselves. Huh? The dynamics is just that. That's the way it turned out to be. right? Everywhere we look, there's us. Our prime minister is black, our president is black. Whereas in the United States, we're in the belly of the beast. It's a different dynamics there. So having our own property doesn't make us free. Those property is the barrel that is going down the river, taking us over the ridge. One of the things that happened, and we talked about it as I was pouring libation, is that we were ripped away from our culture, our spiritual practices. And on the plantation, they introduced their religion to us. We don't want to talk about that, do we? They introduced their religion to us, their concept of God to us. And that's what's in our minds right now. If I tell all of you here, close your eyes, tell me what Jesus looked like. Don't lie to yourself. You will describe that white man in your mind. Let's not talk about that. So to my panelists, to what degree do you think commercialized religion today plays a part in that separation between us, where we can't get to the respect that Dr. Allard talked about, that we need for each other? We can't get to that space to respect each other because my religion says this and your religion says that. To what degree does commercialized religion today, lack of spirituality, keep us as a people divided? That's to my panelists.
A bit of a fowl in a cockroach party, but I'm taking the liberty to comment, maybe suggest something. I grew up in a plural society down south. Then I came to live Tobago. It's not plural from where I'm seeing. However, I do have some positive suggestions going forward for the stress thing, the healing. I don't see a code of life in Tobago like a successful society should have, any society that I look at, and Ryan mentioned some from his travels, Mrs. Burris mentioned adherence to codes. She may not have actually used that. But in my personal childhood growing up, well, a lot of my people I grew up with are now major drug dealers and whatever. What saved me, maybe, yeah, I'm not one, is some sort of a code. I'm able to live here. I like living here. I've been cussed out a lot. But to me, if we sort of get a Tobago code going, because different people refer to it sometimes, esteemed columnist sitting there quietly, many times speak about codes in his writing and behaviors. If we could just come up with some code moving forward of behavior, whether we understand it or not, whether the kids understand it, we might eventually pick up from there and then start to do the deeper thing. So self-reflection, looking back, is a good intellectual exercise, but moving forward, I think we literally just need a strong guideline, codes, however that is. Thanks.
Hi. Before you ask your questions, could you please just say your name, thanks?
Oh, my name? Oh, yeah. I'm the only guy here had to say his name. Bertrand Vicari.
We started it.
Well,
we
it's
started
true.
It now.
Yeah. Okay, Bertrand
You're the
Vicari.
first.
And incidentally, I'm representing, I've come to support Ryan because I met him. We worked together.
Great, man.
But I would like to know from the panel what it thinks about, since the title of the symposium is a post-traumatic slave syndrome, what does the panel see as behaviors in Trinidad and Tobago, especially among people of African origin, that may be the result of this syndrome? And how does one go about dealing with them? It's all very well to say, as my friend George says, let us have the community spirit as we used to have. But that is not so easy. You don't just go back as though nothing has happened for the last several decades. If that is to be done, how is it to be done? If there is no self-respect, why is there no self-respect? and what has happened to cause that lack of self-respect, and what can be done about achieving self-respect if self-respect is to be achieved. If parents are speaking in a certain way to their children, why is that so? Does that come from slavery or does it not? Sorry?
From the home.
Yes, but what is the origin? I'm sure it's in the home, but why is it in the home? Was that always the case? If it was not always the case, what has happened? And what can be done about it? We have to analyze these things before we can come up with solutions and come up with ideas, but before we can come up with solutions as to dealing with these things in a positive way. So I just wanted to hear from the panel, bearing in mind the title of this symposium. We're talking about slavery. We're talking about post-slavery. Slavery ended, as Rawle said, in 1838. We are now in 2020. It is nearly 200 years. If we are still being affected by something that happened 200 and 300 years ago because the slavery is going on, why is that so? And what do we do about it? How do we go about dealing with it if we think it is wrong?
Right. Good evening again. Even before I attempt to take a look at this question that Rodney asked in relation to religion, it goes right back to that thing called respect. It goes right back to whether you see yourself as a descendant of African slaves or a descendant of Africa itself, or are you prepared to say, I am a black man? How about if we say, I am a man? It goes to that self-respect that Ryan was talking about. I got into trouble for that, you know, and recently, so I think it was right at the library when we had the last symposium, I said, I look at myself as a man. I said that at university, and I'm still saying it. I am not going to consider myself less than a man. I am not going to consider myself what you call a black man because of pigmentation. I am man. And if I should go right back to the Bible, we are all created in the image and likeness of Almighty God. Now, in this matter of religion, we were made to feel that there was some other religion that was superior to what was found in Africa. Go to Dr. J.D. Elder's memoirs and you are going to see where he spoke about Melville Herskovitz having to admit that what he saw in Africa was as good as or better than, in terms of religion, what other people were teaching. But we learned from other people. And when people want to decry a shrine to Ubatala, who knows what that is? You're in the jungle, you're not going and hire no taxi to take you to no church. So the people worshipped where they were. And what they called a shrine to Ubatala, we call an altar. You understand? When they say Oludumare, we say from teachings, God is Yahweh. We say God, we say Jehovah, we say all kind of things. But you don't want to hear Oludumare. That's disrespect. So that traditional black religion, Rodney, was turned down. And even among black religious practices, you have a huge gulf between what is called traditional Baptists, who somebody was rude enough to write on some website, despite their African origin, they consider themselves Christian. In other words, who teach us Christianity, shut the door on the Baptists. And they look at the Ifa and the Orisa as if they are sacrilegious. And don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. Some of the people in that religion have led to this disrespect. I don't want to go too much into it because I will get too passionate. We have been the architects of that destruction, Rodney. Everybody. I want to rest there. Just before I get off, whenever I've spoken like I did earlier, I look back at everything I said, like I play back a record. And apparently I might have said 1968 Federation is 1958 Federation, 1968 character. All right, now that I clarify that.
So I wanted to respond to the comment about what is the link between all the problems we have today and slavery and colonialism and the experience of our ancestors. And I think that we have to look back at what were the methods used during those times, right? Now, slavery was different for the slavery of different European powers was implemented differently, right? So what the Portuguese did, what the French did, what the British did was different in their territories. They had different approaches. And the British were very, I suppose, efficient, might be the word, at destroying relationships, at breaking up the esteem that the slaves had, that was kind of a bond of the communities that were brought over, right? So they're very efficient at destroying that, at degrading individuals. You're no longer worthy. We see this something similar in the U.S. where when slave owners were forced to part from their slaves, but they still wanted to use them as a way to get political power, and this is discussed in the book also. The slaves or the freed blacks were given 3/5 of a human status, right? So degrading of humanity, degrading of what you are, and breaking of your bonds and of your family ties is one, but also your respect for yourself, your respect for others. That all came from, at least it was very, very strongly implemented during slavery and in periods after slavery. Let's look at what systems were put in place after slavery, right? So there was freedom on paper, and we still had systems in Trinidad and Tobago that encouraged, for instance, elitism, encouraged separation of people, right? Encouraged you to think of yourself as special, right? So you get a certain award, a national award for an education system, for instance, your education, and you are put on a pedestal, whereas everybody else is beneath you, right? So that thinking pervades throughout the entire society. We see what happens today with what politicians see as what they see themselves as, and what some people who maybe own businesses, some people who are in certain positions of society, what they see themselves as compared to the average person. And that separation leads to disrespect. That separation leads to a belief that, well, I can't do that, or I can't, like you said, challenge authority, because authority has, has control over me. And the attitude for many people locally, as I've seen it, is it's cynicism, right? So you don't believe that anything will happen, anything good will come of the country, unless there's a carnival, right? There is a lot of resignation about things changing. Right, so I was having an interesting discussion with a gentleman who's from Tobago maybe a year and a half ago, and he said, well, nothing has changed in Tobago over the last 20 years. Nothing. Nothing has improved in Tobago in 20 years. Now, clearly, if you look objectively at some things have changed. Maybe you could say some things have gotten worse. So where does that thinking come from? I think it's years of just maybe not seeing changes, but also it's this attitude of being passive, right? We're very dependent. Anytime there's a need for changing something, we automatically point towards the government, right? That's a standard thing here. Maybe it's because of the kinds of occupations that people do, the kinds of teaching that we've been having since we were very young. These things have affected us, and it has flowed from the system, the colonial system that we've lived under for several years. So I think that's the link, those are the connections that we have. I mean, it's hard to say very specifically one particular policy caused one particular result. You have to do a much more detailed economic analysis and political analysis for that. But we can see correlations between what was implemented and what we see today. And I think that is what we need to be unpacking a bit. But we shouldn't spend too much time unpacking. I think we should spend a lot of time, as the theme is healing, we should spend a lot of time on looking at solutions and trying solutions. We may not get the perfect solution to move forward, but we can have things we can identify, maybe today, maybe in other fora. We can identify approaches and programs that somehow improve the society we live in. And I think we should start there, right? We know we have a lot of forums like these where we talk about the challenges we've been going through, the challenges of living in Tobago, living in Trinidad. We can link them to slavery, we can link them to the lack of emancipation, let's say mental emancipation. But unless we plan to move forward and actually start moving forward, we're going to be talking for more and more decades, and that's not going to advance us. So that's how I see it. Let's take action as far as we can. And we adapt as we learn what works and what doesn't work. But we need to take action.
I want to agree with Dr. Allard. And when you read through the book, it talks about that kind of thing, that action needs to be taken, and we need to move away from talking. And she suggests a methodology called informational science, where you look at existing programs, because it is not that we have nothing in place. We do have things in place to try to improve people's lives, and look at the programs that work to some extent, see what are the characteristics of those programs, and trying to develop more programs along those lines. And she said an interesting thing in the book that I thought we need to take on board, because of our history, we don't like to do anything, and if it fails, we are terribly embarrassed, we are upset. But the truth is, if you are trying to do something, you have a destination in mind, and you are developing projects to get to that destination, it must follow that one or two of them might fail. And she says something that goes along the lines of, yes, and you do something and it fails, and then you recover quickly and you make the necessary change, and you go again. In other words, what we are responsible for as people of African descent who have some sense and who understand that we have problems is that we must be doing different things, different projects to change the situation, to change the attitude in Trinidad and Tobago. That if your skin is lighter, you are somehow automatically better. And all of us know this problem. And there is a way, you have to find the different ways to change these things. And as I said, what she said, if you fail, that's fine. You know what caused it to fail, let's go again and make, because we have a lifetime kind of work here. This is not something that's, well, by the end of 2020, we finish. It is not like that. It is a lifetime work, and we pray that the next generation will take it up and run with it. Who mentioned 1970? I'm the gentleman who left. 1970 was a very significant time in Trinidad and Tobago. And the problem is that, and I am a child of 1970, I came of age in that time. The problem is we thought the job was finished. We thought people understood the value of being black, the value of what we looked like. We talked about the contributions we had made in terms of industry and invention and so on. And we thought the job was finished. But it is a job that is a lifetime job, and one generation takes it, and then the next generation takes it, because we slip back all the time. In my time as a young person, everybody wore their afro proudly. You had afros all out there, you had Lord, but there was still a little discriminatory thing there, because we talked about people, Deborah, don't know if you remember, because she kind of around my age. We talk about people who bong to have an afro. So you used to say a bong fro. You're bong to have an afro because your hair is so short and picky. You still have to have a bong fro. So there was still a little bit of discriminatory talk there, but generally we all accepted that our hair was good. It was fine. Now, what I have found in Trinidad and Tobago, there is a significant slipping back even from the progress we had made in 1970. We have the school system, and we know that we have this concord, that's 20% for the religious schools to put in their people, their cousin and what. So 80% should be objectively going into these schools. But if you drive along Mukarapo Road any evening when school let out, you will tell me what you see. Mukarapo Secondary School open, finish, and the children come pouring out. All of them of black skin, more or less. Fatima, one block up the road, you know. All of them of African descent too, but all highly red. How is that possible if the exam is an objective exam and 80% of Fatima children supposed to be just pulled from the general pool? How is that? There is, you know, what Krokro sang, which I really did not take seriously. It's true. There is corruption going on there. Because if you look at the population of Trinidad and Tobago, it is a population of black people, of red-skinned people, of a few white people, of East Indian people. So why are you not seeing that represented in the 80% in Fatima and in the 100% in Mukarapo? It is ridiculous. And we as African people sit down and we watch this all the time, because I am not the only one who have eyes. My eyes don't even work properly. And I am seeing this, so nobody else has seen it to say something about it. How is that?
From 1970, and I suppose this year is the 50th anniversary, so who knows what might happen. If there has been this slippage, why has there been this slippage? If people were so proud in 1970 and the early 70s, what has happened?
That is the thing, Mr. Dumas. People have forgotten that we need to continue the discussion all the time. It is a discussion we should have every day with our children, with our children, with my children. I couldn't find the book, so I end up with Essence magazine, because I don't want them to be only looking at white people as the people who they should admire. They must see black people, and all of us were supposed to do that, and we didn't. We didn't. Now, I knew NJAC had a problem with respect to a property that they had purchased in Hermitage Road in Belmont. I am a Belmont girl too, apart from being a Palliative descended girl. And they were doing the financial transaction. I think they might have paid some of the money, and then, I don't know if perhaps it was deliberately done, there was a fire. And the building burned down, and it was not insured. So they had a set of money to pay. So that kind of took up their time and their financial strength, you know. But they did continue to do a lot of work in the eastern part of Port of Spain, where they had classes and so to help young people. Once you could pass 2-3 subjects, they will take you and help you to get, you know, additional ones. So they did do a lot of work. But their whole financial strength was sapped by having to pay this big loan. So you could say, well, in part it was NJAC, because they are the ones who were leading the whole thrust to bring. I mean, it was a wonderful time. You know, you would have activities going on at the town hall in Port of Spain, and we would go and you see all the ladies dressed up in what they thought was African clothes. We later discovered that this was really a Dutch company making these things, but you know, but we thought it was African clothes. And we would have pictures, you know, with African scenes and so on, which we bought, and I mean, I still have some up in my house. My husband and I used to go. So there was an effort, but we lost our way, and it seems that we're going to have to start again. You're going to have to start. You think it is an accident that Deborah wears her hair natural all the time? That's not an accident. That is 1970. So she never lost it. Okay? I lost it some because when I was in Barbados, I had straightened hair. Okay? But after a while, I say, look, none of this. So we have, the other thing is the religion part. And I know Rodney trained words for me. I am a Methodist. I am a Christian. On Sunday, I am going to be accredited as a local preacher. Deborah is also a local preacher in her church. The way I look at it is this, all communities, black, whatever, all around the world acknowledge a higher power. The higher power I deal with has to do with the Christian and Jesus Christ. Nobody will tell me, who do a little geography in school, that Jesus Christ born in that part of the world and he's a white man. That is for only stupid people will believe that. I'm sorry, because if you feel that the people over there are white, well, that's your story. And so therefore I feel comfortable in that. I know that the religion from West Africa would probably have been perhaps Muslim or some other, you spoke of a deity that I am not familiar with, but all over the world people have different names for God. The Hindus interpret God as so big, so powerful, that they have to have a set of different gods and goddesses to represent God, because they find, oh God, God's so big, how you could just have one? You understand? So that all over the world we have. So for that reason, I am comfortable with my Christian God, my Jesus, who I know is not a white man. And let me talk about my school, Bishop Anstey High School. The year I left school, they designed a, what do they call the things? A mosaic of Jesus that looked like us. Okay? Now, this is an Anglican school started by white people. But that was the mood of the school at the time. So they have, and Jesus is a Rasta in that mosaic. Okay, yeah, Jesus is a Rasta in that mosaic. So the point is, remember, God is a power. So I am not going to say, well, God has to be that, God has to be that. Everybody have their interpretation of God. And finally, Methodists, John Wesley, who didn't really intend to start a church. He was an Anglican minister. But when he died, they had gotten such a large following that they started a church. He was always against slavery. He was always against slavery, John Wesley. Okay? Right.
The first thought that I had came as a result of something that the young doctor here said. And the young doctor said that we oftentimes look for external repairmen for our internal problems. And then he would have insinuated that sometimes we look at the politician as such an external repairman. And so that brought me to the thought of Mahatma Gandhi. Now, Mahatma Gandhi was of the opinion that if we all as individuals were to reach a level of enlightenment, universal enlightenment, then there would be no need for a government, since as automatically we would behave towards each other in a very symbiotic way. And so I said to myself, because I am of the opinion that it's not a matter of if, but when we all reach that level of universal enlightenment. What happens between now and then in terms of politics and politicians? And then the brother next to Mr. Dedan Daniel, he gave me a clue into that. And he suggested that part of our downfall came with party politics. And that led me to a thought. And that thought is that between 1946, when we had our first adult suffrage election, and 1956, the sum total of the votes collected by independent candidates was always greater than the sum total of the votes collected by the party that won, which indicates to me that there was more respect being meted out to the individual and his thoughts. I said, okay, well, that gives me a clue as to the evolution of politics as we go towards enlightenment, but it doesn't answer the question. And then my East Indian brother here behind me gave me another clue. And he said that perhaps we, as black people, and I would go even further on to say perhaps we as human beings should have a code. And I said, well, what is a code? I say a code is a commonality, something that we could all agree upon. And so that reminded me of something Mr. Titus here said, and he spoke about the Federation of the West Indies. Now, the Federation of the West Indies, had it still existed today, African people all over the world could point to the Federation of the West Indies and say, look how great a people we are. We have formed a nation out of separate land masses, and the area or the space between each land mass is greater than the space of any of the land masses. That is how great we are. And that would have given us pride. And so then I started thinking about Miss Burris. And this is why the question is posed at Miss Burris. Because Miss Burris has been speaking continuously about pride. And I'm saying we could start with a commonality in pride. We could all agree that we as Africans, or we as human beings, have succeeded to some extent in all our endeavors where the Federation of the West Indies is concerned. The Socialist Party won, and today we all expect the government to provide education, healthcare, etc. That is a success from the Federation of the West Indies. Where 1970 is concerned, you could be black and hold any position today. That is a success. But all of that is debatable. So I'm asking Ms. Burris, what would you propose as a commonality of pride that we as black people, we as Africans, primarily, not even primarily, secondarily, but we as human beings primarily could look to be proud?
If we look carefully in Tobago and us as African descendants, realize that something is wrong with us. We are free, but still slaves in our minds. Has anyone here ever seen Harriet Tubman documentary on her lifestyle on the Underground Railway? Her value was family life. And though she married to a free man, when she was preparing to leave to run for freedom, he decided to sit down because he didn't want to get into trouble. And that's the problem we have as Africans. We don't want to get into trouble. We'll take anything coming to us without revolting against it. And we have to sit down and listen. The same mentality that happened in the late 1800s is happening in Tobago and Trinidad and some parts of the Caribbean, where we are free, but we still dependent on the state. We do not want to be free ourselves to become entrepreneurs. We want to depend on the state. And we have to get over that. Concerning my brother with religion, Harriet Tubman took the religion of the slave masters to make progress in life. When they had the churches on Sunday, the African slaves have the churches at night. You hear this Sankey, we are having a meeting here tonight. He come with the slavery for the underground. That was the song was sung when they had a meeting to escape from the slave masters. So the innovativeness of our black forefathers is not being used today. Some of us just remain stagnant and depend on others to work for us. And the only way we can progress is we have to work for ourselves and heal ourselves. Because the body heals itself. And if you, no, not heals the body heals itself. And the only way we can heal ourselves from the trauma is to think right and work to heal ourselves individually.
I would ask everyone to remember some of what Dr. Degruy said in her video, where she likened the experience of slavery to experiences where we see post-traumatic stress disorder occurring, and the need for healing, the need for therapy, right? In today's world, we recognize the victim of sex abuse, domestic abuse, violent abuse as needing quite often therapy, and we recognize that they carry with them baggage probably throughout their lifetime, right? They may get help, some help, be able to go back into ordinary life and function, but could also be subject to a reoccurrence based on the external stimulus. And so therefore, I want us to also look at the fact that when we look at the past, let us not look at it in too romantic a view, because there would have been imperfections there that we may not have noticed until the kind of stimulus externally would have brought them to the fore. Right? So let us look at it from the fact that that there is need for therapy, and let us come up with ideas as to how we structure that kind of therapeutic movement forward. All right, thank you.
I want to challenge us. We have had 3 or 4 powerful presentations. I'm always so proud of Ryan. Knew him as a little guy and boy. Anyhow, can't recognize him now. But, well, you didn't allow me to get to my, but I was about to say both Axback and Laureen, I thought, really provoked thought and discussion. What saddens me is that, and it's said already, we leave here and we have not found a mechanism to pull these disparate or these different powerful presentations together to advance the change we want to get. What is the mechanism, the institution, the vehicle by which we wouldn't just go home, think back on a Ralph Gonsalves lecture so high and still haven't done anything after that. Think back on that last lecture in the library that you were there to, Raya. Haven't done anything. We had one, I'm not knocking us, but I think that has to be the challenge. We have some young people came here. Are we encouraging them to go study some of the things delayed? Because I really understand. I'm limited. So are we encouraging them to go and study that they can come back? They have to help us, or doctors have to help us, or lawyers have to help. Our people have to help our people in bringing about the changes we want. So, again, what is the mechanism? Because you see, Laureen, you made a great point when you said, we did all these things and we felt we win in 1970. We relaxed. But the enemy, or the detractors, they have found ways to penetrate and to frustrate and to turn back. You just have to look at the revolution with the weave, a cell phone, box food. If you go through Tobago, everybody have a white box in their hand lunchtime. Everybody. KFC ruling my life. We drop off all the foods we used to eat, all the fruits, and just they are doing it. They know how to divide us and rewind us, as the girls say. They know what to do. We need our brains to be put collectively and strategically together to identify what and where and who we could tap into. And it's so regrettable that we always seem to be working against our political or government directorate. They don't help. Look at the year of the decade of the Black African people. They have done nothing. But the challenge for us is, how can we accomplish change, either with the government or without it? And without has become a greater challenge. What can we do to achieve what we want to achieve, or to put us on the road, as Laureen said? We ain't going to achieve it. We just have to build and work towards it. What is the mechanism by which we avoid or extract from our leaders what we want to get from them and carry us to the place we want to get to? That is the challenge. When we leave here, brothers and sisters, that is what should plague our minds. And the next time we come back, if we had to bring together, I don't know how we're going to do it, but that's what we really need to be doing now, Brother Rodney. How we going to move us on the path of achieving what we want to get.
When you look at history and you see the number of inventions, the number of medical procedures that have come about because of people of African descent, of course, working undercover with other people, well, he's the doctor. You can't really be a doctor because you're black. But it's the black man who might have invented the procedure. We have many stories about that. That is one thing. So we can start by documenting those things so that they are easily available for people to read. Even within your discourse with respect to other people of other races. My take on it, and this is just a personal thing, is that they went and they grabbed anybody. You don't know. I was probably descended from the daughter of a chief. I am a chieftainess. Okay? I come here involuntarily. So you do not know what I was, but I know you come here because you descend from an indentured servant or a criminal. That is how you come here, because most of the planters didn't stay, you know. Once the economy broke down, most of the planters went back to England or they went back to England. The white people who stayed here were the people who were poor up there, and they come down here to get a little food, okay? So that is the discourse that I always had in my school, where it had other white people children, and they thought they were wonderful. And furthermore, when it come into school performance, that is when you're taking them down. Because I grow on blue food, right? Or they grow on all kind of shippiness. So I could pass my exam better than them. And I had Agnes in my corner. She said, you better pass your exam properly. Okay? So, so the point is, it has to be an act of understanding self, understanding that people have worked hard to get you where you are. As I say, my grandmother washed clothes for the hotel. Okay? My grandfather said he was a shoemaker. What I used to see as a child was a lot of linemen in the shop and a big pile of shoes. I used to wonder who under there them shoes belong to. Okay? But he also had a garden and he had cows. So that is how he really supported his family. But I don't know about the shoemaking. And of course, Flora held the whole shop with the thing down the gully. So that ended his career as a shoemaker. But the point is, we have to understand where we came from. None of us here, as Tobagonians, we can't say that these are young fellas, so like his parents who properly educated them. But my grandmother and great-grandmother and things, they were not educated people, but they know that the important thing to change circumstances was education. And they fought for that. So all those are things, Leroy, we can be proud of. My story is not singular. It happened, Deborah, all of us. Your parents fight up with you. Fight up with you. Well, they're not educated in terms of the academic. the academic education, but they
Yeah.
had sense because they know how to feed their children. They knew how to, yes, my apologies, academic education. They didn't have academic education. But the point is, they provided for us the kind of education that ensured that if even we couldn't mind 5 cows, we could still earn an income. Okay? And in the context of what the world around you expects, you would have seen to have made some progress. And it is up to you now, it's up to people like Ryan to make sure that when he's raising his children, they are proud, they are academically gifted, and they could also mind 2 cows, because that is also important, because the quality of your food is an important aspect of your independence of thought. So in terms of Deborah asking what we can do next, we could start the research that could let us say, this is what has happened. George Leacock always had an idea that we should research, for instance, the female entrepreneurs of Scarborough. You know, Miss Kobe, Miss Blackman, Miss Parker, all of them that I grew up with. But you see, the time, and I mean, I am not young again, the energy to do that, that is where we should involve our young people, to let them go and ask questions and so on before all of these people pass on. Miss Kobe done gone along already, Miss Parker probably still there. But those are the things, those are the success stories. Those are the, even my grandmother, so, I mean, she washing her clothes, she sent her child to university in Canada, she sent this one here, I said to them, our teachers, because she was willing to work. And you know, and those are our success stories. All right, I will hush now.
My name is Selma Perkins. I was made in England with Trini parts. When I retired, I came to live in Tobago. I'm a retired early years teacher. And this is where I'm talking about children and respect. When I came down here, I was employed by, I got myself a job with Serval, working in the early years department, visiting the preschools in Trinidad and in Tobago. One of the things that really upset me was the way that the teachers disrespected the children. And if we're talking about making change, then we have to make change with our little people. And we have to start by respecting them, by calling them by their names. Not I, and you, and boy, and sitting on a chair in one corner and shouting at them across the room. So if we start talking about self-respect and self-esteem, we have to start in the early years with the people who work with the little people. Because if we say that children learn by example, then let's show them by example. When I talk to the teachers about other things, not just the way, well, I didn't talk to them about the way they address the children, because I believe in teaching by example. So my way of interacting with those little people was very different to the way that they interacted with those little people. And one of the things, when I would say or make a suggestion or do something about something they were doing, it was, this is the way we does do it here. In other words, you have to find people who are receptive to change. We know that some of the old ways were good, and we say, bring back the old time ways. But we also have to say, that was then and this is now. And things have changed. Deborah was talking about the cell phones, things like that, and technology. Things have changed. So we have to accept change, but we also can remember what went before. So it's a case of combining the two. But most importantly, as I said before, is this thing about respect. Respect and self-esteem. Not putting children down, accepting what they tell us, what they give us, and using it to build their self-esteem. So change works from the bottom up. And very, very quickly, Laureen, you said about Jesus, the colour of Jesus. My eldest grandson is 38. When he was 6 years old, his teacher came to me and said, Thelma, what am I going to do? Dale's just been having an argument with 5 little blonde, blue-eyed white girls in the book corner. And Dale came to Lloyd and he said, Mr. Henry, you have to tell them that Jesus was black. Because these little girls, my friends, and he named them all, said that he wasn't. But my mum said that in the Bible it said he had hair like lamb's wool. And white people do not have hair like lamb's wool.
You know, I sat this evening and I listened about liberation, emancipation, freedom, and I wonder that after 200 years, we are still sitting and talking about healing of what has passed. We cannot change history. And therefore, it is important that we think, and I think the sister across there made the point, what are we going to do from here? How are we going to change our thinking and our perspective for the future? When we go back, it's not helping us to move forward. And I'm going to illustrate the point. I've read of a black woman. She was raped. She was abused. And she was called upon to recant of her belief. And she made a point. She says that you can kill me, but you cannot kill my mind. I would like to know that as we conclude, what are the perspectives? What are we going to do to remove ourselves from where we are to where we want to go in the next few years? We have just begun a new decade. We cannot go back to 2019. It's gone. That's the past. How are we going to teach our young people to remove their minds from what would have happened in the past to where we want to go in the future? You know, every year, 9/11, a large group of people come together and they bring their wreaths, they bring their sorrows, and they stand on the side of where the Twin Towers was situated. And they go back home not being healed because they are repeating the same thing over and over again. If, you know, and when I look at it on the television, I said, if these people want to be healed, they have to remove themselves from the environment and allow their thinking to be on something else. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I think after we have listened, if we can come back again and plot some ideas where we want to go, I think that will be more helpful than talk about healing and liberation and emancipation of what has taken place in the past. May God bless you.
I was going to say that we can find ways. We have the technology now, you know, to find ways to continue this on a forum where, you know, we can all have more questions and more suggestions and come together with a plan for moving forward, right? So we can find ways of doing that. Hopefully we can think about that. But I wanted to make a comment about maybe some things we can think about to move forward. One of them could be, well, it was something I wanted to bring into my opening comments, but I didn't have time. I had a limit of 10 minutes. But I wanted to think about ways that we can kind of shock ourselves into questioning ourselves, right? So, you know, we go forward, we do things based on our thoughts, which become our actions, which become our habits, which become our destiny, right? I saw that somewhere. I think it's a great phrase for us to use. But it means that we have these automatic habits which we don't challenge, right? So things like, you know, how our education system is, like the lady mentioned there, how we teach our children, you know, how once a year Carnival comes around, this thing happens, or we have Heritage Festival, this thing happens, and it's automatic. We don't question whether it's in the right form for us to become a better society. So maybe the start of this should be very public questioning of what it is to be a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, to be somebody of African descent, perhaps, to be from Tobago, and what it is to be somebody who's becoming better, who's growing, you know, who's developing in some way. And let's challenge ourselves to that, right? So let's have a campaign that can challenge people to think about it, force them into thinking about it in a certain way. Well, not physically force them, of course, but challenge them in a way where it's exciting, it's interesting, you draw people in. Again, the room, although we have about 50 people in the room today, the last time we had a session like this, it was a few less, I think. And Tobago alone has 60,000 people, right? So it's a very small number of people in the room currently with so many ideas. Imagine what could be happening when 1,000 times this number show up at an event, right? So there's a lot of potential here. We have more questions already. And I think there's a lot we can do. I think we just need to start with something small and build on that. So that would be my suggestion. Let's find a way to challenge ourselves nationally about what it means to be growing, to be developing.
The most fundamental question I think was asked by the brother in the back there. Because I am contending that one of the reasons why we're talking about healing, the theme of today's thing is about healing, right? And I think we have to go back in a very fundamental way. And one of the issues that we face in Tobago is the same issues we face people in the African diaspora all over the world face, whether it's Brazil, it's Trinidad, Grenada, Jamaica, and so on. And I am contending that one of the fundamental reasons why we face the issues that we face is that we have been alienated from the basis of our spirituality. And we have been replaced it with a watered-down version of a version that we have been, which was part of the enslavement process, right? That has been part of the enslavement process. Now, and we see the ways how we could heal, how it's manifesting in our languaging. I've heard it mentioned a couple of times here this afternoon that our ancestors were slaves. They were not slaves. They were enslaved people, right? And we had to start to think about how the languaging and how we perpetuate and support and the kind of thing, and we had to get to the healing. So I'm saying the fundamental thing is that one of the things about African spirituality is it recognizes divinity in everything, right? And again, we jump into a process, we legitimize it, we normalize it, we glorify it, and all kind of thing. And that is what is part of the problem that we face all over the diaspora. And we had to confront it honestly, right? And that's what we're not doing. We're dancing around it. Everybody in the dance. The dance has become part of the process. And then we have other institutions and so on that help to support the whole enslavement, the same education system that when you look at what happened during the post-slavery period, when we start to look at the class system, this is something that could be alien to us, but we buy into our European hegemony of how we class people. Who are the people who emerged first? The religious people, the teachers. It's reflected. Look in Tobago in 2020, we have a political system which I call a teachocracy, or practically everybody who in charge was a teacher, or religious persons, right? And we get to the real thing that caused some of these things for us and examine it critically, right? And I will always say that perhaps one of the baneful influence of people who look like me and you, most of us actually, is the watered down version of religiosity that we step into and we glorify and we do all kind of thing, and we need to examine it and stop it. Stop it.
We'll invite a representative of the library to give the rules to thanks.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gabrielle Fernandez. I'm a librarian for the Scarborough Adult Library and the Tobago Heritage Library. It is my pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of the Tobago Writers Guild and Tobago Library Services. I would like to extend heartfelt thanks first to our panelists and moderator, who graciously gave their time and energies to this topic. They took the time to read and digest Dr. Joy Degruy's book and analyze it for us from a local perspective. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, insights, and ideas for healing. So thank you, Dr. Rawle Titus, Laureen Burris-Phillip, Ryan Allard, and Xavier Edwardz. Please give them a round of applause. I'd also like to thank Ayanna Phillip, Miss Melanin Magic, who presented her powerful spoken word piece, Rewind. Thank you to Mr. Rodney Pigott, who opened the program with pouring of libations. Thank you to the media for helping us to promote, cover, and record the event. That was TTT, Tobago Channel 5, and New Lens Media, who's responsible for the sound system and videography today. I would like to acknowledge members of the Tobago Writers Guild and staff of Tobago Library Services who contributed to the program. And ladies and gentlemen, a hearty thank you to you all for being here, for participating, for your wonderful questions, insights, and ideas. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you at our next lecture. Don't forget to add your email address to the sign-in sheet if you haven't as yet, to receive notification of upcoming lectures. And I'd also like to let you know that at the library we have sourced Dr. Degruy's book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and that it's still being processed, but we should have copies in the library very soon for you to borrow. All right, both at this library and at the Roxborough branch and the Charlottesville Library. All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a wonderful evening.